This is an oil painting of Sabang Beach in Mohr. It's a well-known surf spot in the many islands of the Philippines. It was done by my surf/business/life partner, Aedriane. So I thought I'd make something in return. Something that would be more than just a decor for a desk, a shelf, a night table, or even a wall to look pretty. I wanted something that would remind her of the ocean. Something that would almost let her hear the sound of the crashing waves. Something like a surfboard fin out of plywood and mahogany on make. I wanted a fin that has subtle curves yet has a bold length. So I decided to print the single fin FCS2 Flow 11.0 to serve as my silhouette. Well, since I don't have an A3 printer, I just cropped and printed the image to its actual size and then simply taped them together. Soon as I was done, I went straight to the workshop. Now I know this is an eyesore for you guys, but believe me, it was hella worse before I started woodworking. This shed was built only because my dad needed more space for his stuff. I only began woodworking March of 2018, which was summer here in the Philippines. I did mostly of my woodworking projects outdoors, and by the time the rainy season was about to pay a visit, I decided to organize the shed to make space for my tools and equipment. So enough about me, let's just get on to the build.
Never gonna get it, 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 never gonna.
So I had a few 3/4 inch plywood and some 1x8 mahogany cutoffs. The tools I used for the fin are the table saw, measuring tape,
combination square, pencil and a ruler, a file and some sandpapers, random orbital sander, and of course,
the jigsaw.
I was lucky enough that the cutoffs were square, so I marked the ones that I liked the most. The plywood I had wasn't really furniture grade and it only had 5 plies, but I treat everything as a blank canvas. So after marking, I went to the table saw and used my DIY crosscut sled. Now I know I could rip this piece with a table fence, but I find that this is easier and a lot safer. However, the weather wasn't really the best for my setting. It was dark and really humid, so I had a hard time with the lighting. It was crazy raining every single day and didn't have much time, so I had to keep going. Accuracy at this step wasn't really much of a concern, so I just cut one edge about 10mm, which will roughly be the thickness of the fin, and then set my stop block so I can make repeatable cuts. After that, I roughly measured and cut the length of pieces with the least amount of internal gaps so I can lay them all out against the printed image. As soon as I finalized the layout, it was time for glue up. The actual glue up. I clustered the pieces so I wouldn't deal much with the bowing when I clamped them all together. The pieces were quite delicate at this point, so I really took my time here. I used all the clamps I had, and since it was really humid, the glue dried a lot longer than it should have, so I had to wait until the next day. Fortunately, the weather was great, so after it had dried, I again laid it out against the image so I can make sure that I would be making the most out of the cut pieces. Then again, I clamped them all together for the final glue up. Although my workshop setting isn't the most ideal, there's still a little charm there, being quite close to nature. Even my buddies share the same feels. Alec. Rambo. So after joining all the pieces and the glue dried, I took out the clamps and made sure everything was intact so I can proceed to cutting the shape of the fin. I cut out the printed image to serve as my template, and then it's ready for the jigsaw.
Pro tip: don't try to fix a speaker while holding a jigsaw.
So I went really nice and slow here, but
I think my glue up wasn't completely dry, so there.
after dealing with that, I went to working with the mahogany piece, which will be the bottom portion of the fin. I cut the piece to length after measuring it and then went to thinning it down. Now I know you guys are probably cringing on this approach, but I don't have a bandsaw, so I just took my time and made sure my setup was safe. I decided to apply a half lap joint for the two materials, but I don't have a set of dado blades, so I just made multiple passes to achieve that. Then I just cleaned it up with a nice and sharp chisel. The next day was another rainy one, and I was kinda nervous to cut the portion I messed up, even though I made sure that I placed enough glue. Upon entering the shop, I felt pretty good. The sun suddenly went out while the birds chirped, so I proceeded to cutting the piece to shape. And it went through. I went cutting the other side nice and easy, and it was good. Or at least I think it was. So instead of again waiting for the glue up to dry, I decided to mark the middle of the edge of the fin, so when I shape the piece, it'll have two even sides. After that, I lightly file the edges down so I have a little bit of reduced material. After the glue had dried the next day, I continued cutting the piece to its final form. I then went to cutting a half lap on the plywood piece using my tapering jig. So again, I cleaned up the half lap with a chisel, test fit, and then rough cut the mahogany with a jigsaw. As soon as I was done, I went to sanding the plywood piece and then refined the shape with the file. If you guys made it this far, I'm guessing you're enjoying the video, so please hit the like button, and if you want to see more, subscribe to my channel. Thanks! After refining the shape, it was time to glue the mahogany and the plywood pieces together. After drying, I took them out of the clamps and it was time for a lot of sanding. Some of the plywood veneers had some gaps, so I decided to just fill them with some wood putty just to tone down the rusticness of the piece. While I leave that to dry, I decided to make a base for the fin. Now I didn't really have a design in mind, so this was a bit spontaneous, but the sun was out and the weather was good, so I kept going. I marked and cut the tangile in half so I can sandwich the fin for a perfect fit. I then marked the scrap pine with a gap created by the thickness of the fin to serve as the inlay. So after cutting the pine using the table saw, it was time for some glue up
and some clamping.
I then went to finish sanding the fin with 240 grit and decided to create a quote-unquote trim between the plywood and the mahogany using gold color spray paint. I forgot to shoot the part where I scored the edges of the quote-unquote trim, so
That's my bad.
next day was staining the mahogany with a nice Wenger finish by Kuni.
Disclaimer.
The products I use are not sponsors of the video. I just prefer using them because they are really accessible and they work well for me. Anyway, after applying 2 coats, I finished the fin with a clear spray lacquer. And then while I wait for the coats to dry, I worked on refining the base of the fin. I cut the piece to its final size, flush cut the inlays, and use my electric hand planer. As soon as I was happy with the overall piece, I set up my trim router with a 1/2 inch round over bit and trimmed the edges. I rounded the corners of the base using the random orbital sander and then hand sanded the edges for refinement. But the tangile is really a fibrous material, so I decided to wet the piece so the fibers will pop out for final sanding. As soon as I was done, I then oil stained the base except the pine inlays. And sprayed more lacquer on the fin. While I wait in between coats, I worked on the base and eventually finished spray lacquered it as well. Although this piece appears really simple, it represents a lot of memories. Good memories. And whether Aedriane decides to place it on a desk, a shelf, a night table, or even a wall, it will always look
Pretty.
well, hopefully.